They say a man's true wealth is not counted in coins, but in consciousness. Before gold gathers in his hands, it must first gather in his mind. Every fortune, every empire, every masterpiece began as an invisible seed, an idea charged with belief, held long enough to become real. Yet most people live as if waiting for permission to act rich, waiting for evidence before belief, waiting for success before embodying it. They never realize that the universe mirrors state, not circumstance, that you attract not what you want, but what you are. Napoleon Hill once wrote, "Faith is the only known antidote for failure." But faith, in his language, was not mere hope, it was the deliberate act of assuming the feeling of wealth before wealth arrives. It was to live as if the unseen were already visible, to breathe as though the dream were done. If this kind of truth speaks to something deep inside you, if you've ever felt that quiet pull toward mastery, purpose, and creation, then stay close. Because what you're about to hear is not just philosophy, it's a living blueprint for transformation. If this message resonates, take a moment to breathe, like this video, share it with those who walk your path, and subscribe, not for content, but for alignment. Because this channel is where belief becomes blueprint, and where thought learns to shape reality. Every transformation begins in silence, before the first action, before the first plan, before even the first word. There is a moment when the mind stands on the edge between what is and what could be, where the air itself feels heavier with possibility. Napoleon Hill called it the birth of definiteness of purpose, the point where vague longing hardens into decision. But decision alone is not enough. The world is filled with people who decided once and never followed through. The invisible beginning requires something rarer, the act of assuming the state of what you seek before it appears. Imagine a man sitting alone in a dim room. His bank account reads nearly empty. His dreams, once vivid, have dulled beneath the weight of survival. The clock ticks, the rent looms, and yet somewhere within him flickers a strange idea. What if wealth is not something to chase, but something to become? He remembers Hill's words, "Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve." At first, they sound naive, too simple, too poetic to be practical. But something in him refuses to dismiss it. He realizes that every invention, every empire, every miracle of achievement began as belief daring to outlive doubt. He begins, hesitantly, to imagine himself already wealthy. Not in the shallow sense of possessions, but in the inner sense of having become a person to whom wealth naturally belongs. He walks differently. He speaks with quiet assurance. He treats each interaction as if opportunity hides inside it. His outer world hasn't changed, not yet, but something subtle shifts in the field of his mind. A vibration forms, invisible but powerful, whispering that thought precedes fact, that consciousness is the first currency of creation. Most people dismiss this stage because it cannot be measured. They want proof before posture, results before resonance. Yet the universe seems to operate in reverse, evidence follows emotion. As Hill discovered from Andrew Carnegie, the mind that holds a clear purpose backed by belief begins to attract conditions harmonized with that belief. It is not superstition, it is the psychology of resonance. The subconscious mind, once impressed with a definite idea, reorganizes behavior, perception, and attention until the outer world rearranges to reflect the inner command. To act wealthy before the bank agrees is to signal the subconscious, "This is who I am now. Find me evidence to match." But this transformation demands more than imagination, it demands discipline of identity. The man in the dim room begins a ritual each morning. Before touching his phone, before touching his worry, he touches his vision. He closes his eyes and sees himself free, not running from debt, but moving toward creation. He writes in his journal, not of lack, but of becoming. He speaks affirmations that feel almost blasphemous at first, like lies whispered to a skeptical world. Yet each repetition softens resistance, like waves smoothing stone. Hill called this autosuggestion, the deliberate feeding of the subconscious with thoughts of wealth until they harden into belief. It is not pretending, it is programming. Days pass. Nothing magical happens, no lottery, no sudden inheritance. But subtle changes ripple outward. He finds himself more alert, more magnetic, more composed under stress. Opportunities he would have ignored before now feel alive with potential. His energy begins to precede him, people respond differently, conversations deepen, coincidences multiply. The outer results are still small, but internally he knows something irreversible has begun. The invisible beginning has taken root. What no one tells you about acting wealthy is that it first exposes every belief in your poverty. When you assume abundance, your doubts protest, they scream for recognition. The man feels this too. His mind hurls accusations. Who are you to act rich? You're pretending. You're delusional. Yet Hill's writings echo through his thoughts like a steady drumbeat. Faith is a state of mind which may be induced by autosuggestion. In other words, belief can be built. It need not wait for proof. It can be practiced into being. This is where the true work begins, not in earning money, but in earning mastery over self. For every step toward wealth, consciousness is met by an equal test of faith. Fear disguises itself as logic. Doubt wears the mask of humility. The man must learn to look beyond beyond appearances, to see that the outer world is merely the shadow of inner vibration. As he trains his mind to dwell in the frequency of abundance, he discovers that his emotions are the tuning fork of creation. When he feels gratitude before the gift, confidence before the contract, joy before the outcome, the field begins to move. There is a hidden law here, as ancient as the Stoics and as modern as psychology. Perception creates participation. We do not see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. To change one's state is to change one's experience. The man begins to notice small miracles, not because the universe changed, but because he did. The same streets look different. The same people sound wiser. The same challenges now appear as raw material for growth. His circumstances haven't yet improved, but his consciousness has expanded, and that is the true beginning of wealth. Every empire starts here, in the invisible, in the quiet decision to embody the end before it arrives. The seed of wealth grows in unseen soil long before the tree touches the sky, and though the world still calls him broke, he knows something the world does not. He has already crossed the threshold. The man who once waited for opportunity now radiates it, and though the evidence is not yet visible, the vibration is unmistakable. He has begun to act wealthy, and soon, the universe will have no choice but to agree. His reflection in the darkened window looks almost unfamiliar, not the man of scarcity he once knew, but the faint outline of who he is becoming. He smiles, quietly, as if sharing a secret with the unseen forces that shape destiny. Outside, the city sleeps, unaware that another mind has awakened to its power. And as he drifts to sleep, one thought remains: wealth begins not in possession, but in perception. The invisible beginning has already begun. In every human life, there exists an inner stage, a private theater where the future performs its first rehearsal. Few ever step behind the curtain, yet everything that later appears in the world is first projected here, in the imagination. Napoleon Hill called it the workshop of the mind, where desire and belief merge to form the blueprint of destiny. He understood that before you can possess anything outwardly, you must first possess it inwardly, with such intensity that the subconscious begins to treat the vision as fact. This is where they act as if philosophy becomes something far deeper than pretense. It becomes the art of conscious creation. The man who once sat in darkness now understands this. His mornings have changed. He no longer stares at the numbers on his bank app like a prisoner counting chains. Instead, he builds mental pictures, detailed, living, and emotional. He sees himself walking through a world shaped by his higher self. He imagines the feel of his success, the texture of fine paper beneath his fingers as he signs a deal, the quiet satisfaction in his chest as he contributes to others, the freedom of choosing his day rather than surviving it. These are not fantasies. They are instructions sent to the subconscious, orders written in emotion rather than ink. And emotion, as Hill taught, is the language of the subconscious mind. Each morning, this inner film becomes clearer. The more he repeats it, the more real it feels, and the more real it feels, the more his behavior unconsciously aligns with it. Neuroscience now echoes what Hill intuited nearly a century ago. The brain cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When you imagine with conviction, you activate the same neural pathways as physical action. The subconscious, obedient and literal, begins to organize your behavior to match the image it's been given. Faith, in this sense, is not a mystical leap but a neurological law. To act as if is to train the nervous system to expect victory, and expectation, more than chance, determines outcome. Yet visualization alone is not enough. It must be charged with emotion, belief so potent that it dissolves resistance. Without feeling, imagination is just daydreaming. With feeling, it becomes alchemy. The man learns this one morning when doubt returns like an uninvited guest. He sits in meditation, trying to picture his success, but his mind keeps whispering, "You're lying to yourself. Look at your reality." For a moment, he almost agrees. Then something inside him hardens, a new kind of defiance, quiet but immovable. He says aloud, not to convince the world but to command his own subconscious, "This is who I am becoming. The evidence will catch up." His voice trembles, but faith doesn't require volume. It requires vibration. In that moment, the image stabilizes. He feels it, the gratitude of a life transformed, the calm confidence of a man in control of his destiny. The emotional charge locks into place. Hill would have called this faith in motion. The Stoics might have called it living according to the logos, aligning one's inner reason with the divine order. Psychologists might call it self-directed neuroplasticity. The language varies, but the principle is the same. Belief creates pathways, and those pathways become performance. From that day forward, his imagination becomes his temple. Each visualization session feels sacred, a communion between his conscious and subconscious minds. He begins to see how every successful person he admires once stood in this same space, staring into the void of uncertainty, holding their vision until it solidified into matter. Edison, Carnegie, Ford, all men who acted on invisible images long before the world saw them. The man realizes he is not alone in this process. He is participating in a law older than than commerce itself. But this practice demands persistence. There are mornings when the vision feels vibrant, and others when it fades like fog. On those days, the temptation is to skip the ritual, to surrender to the dull rhythm of ordinary thought. Yet Hill warned that the mind, like a muscle, strengthens only through repetition. Autosuggestion requires constancy, the daily feeding of the subconscious with belief, even when appearances mock it. Faith, Hill wrote, is developed by persistence in affirmations of desire. It is in those dull mornings that the man's true transformation is tested. Each repetition of belief in the face of doubt forges invisible armor around his spirit. And slowly, the world begins to reflect his inner rehearsal. A friend calls with a small business idea, something he would have dismissed before, but now he feels ready. His posture in conversations changes. He listens more, speaks with calm conviction, carries himself as though outcomes bend toward him. People sense it, though they cannot name it. It's not arrogance, it's alignment. He is no longer chasing opportunity, he is attracting it. For the subconscious mind, now reprogrammed, filters perception to notice only what aligns with wealth, confidence, and purpose. The law of attraction is simply the law of attention refined. At night, he writes in his journal, not about results, but about resonance. Today, he writes, I caught myself acting like the man I intend to become. It felt natural. That one word, natural, is the sign of embodiment. When acting as if becomes being, the bridge between imagination and reality collapses. The theater of the mind has become the blueprint of the world. Outside, the city hums. Its lights shimmer like scattered gold coins across the horizon. He watches them from his window, realizing that every glowing bulb, every building, every invention was once a thought, rehearsed by someone who dared to believe before seeing. The mind, he realizes, is the world's first currency, and imagination, its printing press. As he closes his journal, a soft smile forms. The movie has begun, but he knows there are greater scenes ahead. The theater of the mind is no longer fantasy, it is his foundation. And as the night folds into silence, one truth whispers through his consciousness, you cannot out-earn your self-image. The man drifts into sleep, carrying that realization like a lantern through the dark, the awareness that his next chapter will demand not just vision, but endurance. Because to act as if is one thing. To persist as if even when the world denies you, that is where the real transformation moves in a straight line. Between vision and victory lies a wilderness, the uncertain stretch where faith is tested, not in whispers but in storms. It is here that most turn back. For the mind that dares to believe before seeing must eventually confront the full resistance of its old identity. The man who had begun to act wealthy, who had rehearsed his future in the theater of imagination, now steps into that wilderness. The first tests come quietly, almost politely, like shadows creeping beneath a door. A deal that seems certain falls apart. A friend withdraws their support. A sudden expense wipes away the small savings he'd managed to gather. It feels cruelly poetic, as if life itself has decided to mock his newfound faith. For days he walks around with a knot in his chest, wondering if he's been deceived by his own optimism. The old voice returns, whispering, you see, nothing has changed. You're still the same man, pretending. And in the silence that follows, the echo of those words threatens to undo months of inner work. But deep within, another voice stirs, quieter, but older, like something eternal speaking through him. This is the test Hill warned about, it says. Faith that has not been tested cannot be trusted. He remembers the pages of Think and Grow Rich, where Hill describes temporary defeat as the refining fire of success, the point at which desire must prove its endurance. Every adversity, Hill wrote, carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. It is not a comforting phrase, it is a challenge. The man realizes that his vision was never meant to manifest easily. Its purpose was not just wealth, but mastery over the only battlefield that matters, the mind. The days that follow feel like walking through thick fog. Nothing seems to move. The outer world resists his inner conviction. And yet, each morning, he still sits in silence, still closes his eyes, still imagines the life he's creating. Some mornings the vision feels empty, mechanical. Other times it sparks like fire again. What keeps him going is not motivation but decision. He has chosen to believe, and that choice is not up for debate. Faith, he learns, is not the absence of doubt, it is the refusal to surrender to it. One night, exhausted, he goes for a walk through the sleeping city. The streets glisten from a recent rain, streetlights shimmering on puddles like melted gold. He feels both small and infinite, a man caught between two worlds, one visible and one unseen. Stopping beneath a flickering lamp, he whispers to himself, if everything I desire already exists in potential, then this delay is not punishment, it's preparation. The thought steadies him. He realizes that the gap between belief and evidence is where identity crystallizes. Anyone can believe when the outcome is certain. The true creator believes before the evidence appears. In the days that follow, persistence becomes his religion. He'll define persistence as sustained effort necessary to induce faith. The man now understands this not as repetition of action, but repetition of vibration. The daily return to the feeling of certainty even when uncertainty surrounds him. He begins to speak differently about his setbacks. Instead of saying, "I failed," he says, "I learned." Instead of saying, "I lost," he says, "I'm refining." Every disappointment becomes raw material for deeper faith. Every delay becomes an invitation to trust the unseen process. Then, one afternoon, something shifts. He receives a message from an old acquaintance who had once dismissed his ideas. They need help with a project, small but meaningful. He takes it, not for the money, but for the momentum. That single act of persistence ripples outward. The project leads to another and another. Soon, doors begin to open in directions he could never have predicted. It isn't magic, it's alignment. His inner vibration has stabilized, his outer world finally begins to mirror it. In hindsight, he realizes that the trial was never about loss, it was about refinement. The universe was asking, can you remain the same vibration when the world gives you reasons to doubt it? The answer, forged through persistence, is yes. He recalls Hill's story of his son, born without ears, who learned to hear through belief and persistence alone. There is no such thing as failure, Hill wrote, except the failure to persevere. The man now feels the truth in his bones. His bank account is still modest, but his confidence is absolute. He no longer acts wealthy, he is wealthy in consciousness. And that is where every fortune begins. But the test of faith leaves its mark. There are scars, not on his body, but on his certainty. They remind him of nights when belief felt like madness, when he considered giving up, when he faced his own subconscious resistance and chose to keep moving. Those scars are sacred. They are proof of transformation. Every successful soul bears them, invisible symbols of persistence worn beneath polished exteriors. One evening, as the sun sets behind the skyline, he stands by his window and looks out at the horizon. The light fades slowly, painting the city in shades of bronze and shadow. He feels an unfamiliar calm, not the thrill of hope, but the quiet strength of faith fulfilled. He whispers to the fading light, "The trial wasn't meant to break me. It was meant to make me real." And in that whisper lies a secret most never learn, that the universe does not test your dreams to deny them, but to measure your readiness to receive them. The city grows darker, but within him, something glows. The fire of persistence burns steady, no longer desperate, but deliberate. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities, and perhaps new doubts. But he knows now that the path of creation is not linear, it spirals upward through repetition, reflection, and refinement. The man who once sought proof has become proof. Faith has evolved into knowing. And as night drapes over the city like velvet, he closes his eyes once more. The trial of faith is over, but its lesson lingers. Wealth is not given to the man who wishes, but to the man who withstands. The darkness outside no longer feels threatening, it feels alive, like fertile soil waiting for the next seed of thought. The storm has passed. The next chapter will no longer be about survival, but expansion. Seems to live in numbers, digits glowing on a screen, possessions lined up like trophies of validation. But real wealth begins long before the numbers change. It begins as a frequency, a vibration of mind so refined that it draws into form whatever matches its tone. Hill called this success consciousness, a state of harmony between thought, belief, and emotion that magnetizes opportunity. To the casual observer, it looks like luck. To those who understand the deeper law, it is resonance. The world, after all, can only return the vibration you send into it. The man has passed through doubt and persistence. Now, he begins to sense the invisible architecture beneath his success. When he walks into a room, people feel something they cannot name, a composure, a centered confidence that needs no announcement. It isn't arrogance, it's alignment. His energy no longer leaks through worry or self-doubt. He has become deliberate in thought and emotion, aware that every reaction either enriches or bankrupts his vibration. Hill once wrote, "Every man is what he is because of the dominating thoughts he permits to occupy his mind." The man now guards his thoughts like treasure, not out of fear, but reverence. He notices how easily others give their vibration away. Complaints, envy, small talk, all small withdrawals from their unseen account. But he chooses differently. He speaks gratitude instead of frustration, possibility instead of limitation. He begins to understand that vibration is not metaphor but mechanism. Emotion is energy in motion, and that motion writes the script of experience. When he feels lack, his world contracts. When he feels abundance, it expands. This realization becomes his new discipline, to maintain his wealth vibration not as performance, but as presence. One afternoon, he sits at a cafe, writing ideas for a new business. The air is warm, sunlight flickering through the glass, conversations murmuring around him. For a moment, he pauses to watch people passing on the street, some rushing, some lost in thought. He realizes that each of them vibrates at a different rhythm, each carrying an invisible frequency of thought. Most are tuned to survival. Few are tuned to creation. He recalls Hill's principle of definiteness of purpose and understands it now not just as focus, but as frequency. A definite purpose stabilizes vibration. Without it, energy scatters. With it, energy compounds. The wealthy mind, therefore, is not busy, it is coherent. He returns to his journal, where he writes, "I am no longer chasing wealth. I am circulating it." The sentence surprises him. It feels truer than he expected. He realizes that money, too, is vibration, a form of energy that flows toward certainty, gratitude, and value. When you act from fear, you repel it. When you act from contribution, you invite it. Wealth, he sees, is not something to hold, it is something to conduct. You are either a magnet or a blockage. The man chooses to become a conductor. As his awareness deepens, synchronicities increase. People appear at the right time, ideas unfold with ease, projects succeed with less struggle. It's not that effort disappears, it's that effort now rides a current. Hill's words echo again, when you are ready for a thing, it will make its appearance. Readiness is vibration. The man's faith, persistence, and definiteness have tuned him to the frequency of results. What once felt like coincidence now feels like law. One evening, he meets a mentor, a quiet, older man who seems to radiate calm. Over coffee, they speak of business, purpose, and mind. The mentor says, money is not the goal. It's the echo. The real goal is alignment with what creates value. When you align with value, wealth has no choice but to follow. The words strike him like lightning. He realizes that wealth vibration is not selfish. It's service amplified. The more he contributes through creativity, excellence, and faith, the more abundance flows back, not as charity from the universe, but as compensation for harmony. He begins to feel a new sense of responsibility. If his vibration affects his world, then his inner state is not private, it's generative. His doubt pollutes. His faith purifies. His emotions, once seen as personal moods, are now instruments of creation. He understands why Hill emphasized self-control and positive mental attitude, not as moral advice, but as vibrational hygiene. Negativity bankrupts the soul before it empties the wallet. Days turn into weeks, and the man's life begins to resemble what he once only imagined. His business grows steadily, relationships deepen, and the quiet confidence within him hardens into truth. Yet he remains aware that this success is fragile, not because it can vanish, but because vibration must be maintained. Wealth consciousness is not a one-time attainment, it's a frequency that must be tuned daily through gratitude, purpose, and clarity. Each night, he still performs his ritual, sitting in silence, visualizing his goals, thanking the unseen intelligence that guides him. But now the tone has changed. His gratitude is not anticipation, it is acknowledgement. He no longer prays for wealth, he gives thanks from it. That single shift transforms everything. Gratitude, he discovers, is the most magnetic vibration of all. It tells the universe, I already have, therefore I can receive more. He recalls Hill's notion of infinite intelligence, the unseen force that responds to faith-backed thought. Whether one sees it as spirit, subconscious, or universal law, it behaves the same, it mirrors the vibration of the sender. The man no longer doubts this. His own life is proof. Faith, imagination, persistence, these were not abstract virtues, they were vibrational tools. Each one raised his frequency until the world adjusted to meet it. One night, he stands on his balcony, looking over the glowing city below. The breeze carries the faint hum of life, cars, laughter, distant music. It all feels connected, rhythmic, alive. He realizes that he, too, is part of that symphony, a single note within a vast, vibrating order. Money, he murmurs, is just a translation of energy. And for the first time, he feels wealthy not because of what he has, but because of what he is. The stars above shimmer like promises, each one a reminder that the universe does not speak in words, but in frequency. As he closes his eyes, he senses a deep stillness inside, the kind of peace that comes when thought, emotion, and purpose move as one. Tomorrow, he knows, will bring expansion. But tonight, he simply listens to the vibration of his own becoming, the steady hum of alignment that sounds, unmistakably, transformation like ends where it began, within. But the man who now stands before the mirror is not the same one who once stared into darkness, wondering if belief could outlive doubt. His eyes carry a calm fire, the quiet authority of someone who no longer argues with reality because he has learned to shape it. The world around him has changed, wealth flows, opportunities multiply, his work carries impact, yet he knows these outer results are merely reflections of an inner revolution. The true wealth he has gained is invisible, mastery of mind, alignment with purpose, harmony with the unseen laws that govern all creation. He recalls the night he first began acting wealthy, the trembling voice that declared, "This is who I am becoming." Back then, it felt like a lie whispered to the universe. Now, it feels like a prophecy fulfilled. He understands that faith was never about pretending something false, it was about rehearsing something true before the world could see it. Napoleon Hill's voice echoes through his memory. There are no limitations to the mind except those we acknowledge. Every limit he once believed in has dissolved, not because he conquered the world, but because he stopped obeying the boundaries of old thought. Wealth, he has discovered, is not a number, it's a narrative. It's the story the mind tells about what is possible, and the courage to live that story until it becomes fact. Hill's great gift was not instruction but revelation, that thought, when mixed with faith and persistence, becomes a creative force as real as gravity. The man now lives by this law. He no longer chases wealth as a goal but cultivates it as a consequence. He knows that every idea born of purpose carries its own magnetism, that the universe bends toward minds that think with clarity, feel with conviction, and act with faith. In time, others begin to notice the transformation. Friends ask for advice, drawn not to his success but to his serenity. He tells them the truth: I stopped trying to get rich. I started trying to grow rich in mind. They smile, thinking it's metaphor, but he knows it is literal. For the mind rich in gratitude, vision, and discipline inevitably expresses that richness through results. The outer wealth follows the inner order. He begins to mentor others, teaching what Hill once taught: that definiteness of purpose is the root of all achievement, that faith is a vibration, and that the subconscious mind is the silent architect of destiny. Yet there is something deeper he now feels compelled to share, something Hill hinted at but few truly grasped. Wealth is not accumulation but circulation. The more he gives time, wisdom, value, the more the flow increases. The law of vibration does not reward hoarding, it rewards movement. To give is to affirm abundance. To hold tightly is to affirm fear. And fear, he now knows, is the only poverty that truly exists. He reflects on the long arc of his journey, the invisible beginning, the visions rehearsed in solitude, the trial of faith, the discipline of vibration. Each phase, he realizes, was necessary to awaken one truth: that the mind is both seed and soil. Whatever belief you plant, the subconscious will grow. If you plant limitation, you harvest struggle. If you plant faith, you harvest freedom. The harvest, always, matches the seed. One morning, he visits the place where his journey began, the small apartment where he once sat in doubt and desperation. The room feels smaller now, though it hasn't changed. It's not the space that's different, it's his perception. The air still hums with old memories, fear, uncertainty, hope. He smiles softly, whispering gratitude to the younger version of himself who dared to begin. Without that first fragile act of faith, none of this would exist. Every empire of thought starts with one decision: to believe beyond evidence. As he stands there, sunlight slips through the blinds, painting gold across the worn wooden floor. The image feels symbolic: light entering darkness, abundance illuminating lack. He realizes that every person alive has their own version of this room, a place in consciousness where limitation hides behind fear. And he knows, as Hill knew, that freedom begins the moment one chooses to act as if the higher truth is already real. Feeling is the secret, Neville Goddard once said. Faith is the bridge, Hill would reply. Together they describe the same law: embody now what you wish to experience later. The man leaves the apartment quietly, closing the door with reverence. The past is not an anchor anymore, it's a teacher. On the street, the city is alive, the hum of engines, the rhythm of footsteps, the pulse of potential everywhere. He feels attuned to it, as if the world itself breathes with him. There is no separation between inner and outer anymore. Everything is connected by vibration, a vast orchestra playing in frequencies of thought and feeling. And in that realization, he understands the final secret: wealth is not something to achieve, but something to remember. For we are born rich, in imagination, in capacity, in divine inheritance. Poverty is amnesia. Wealth is remembrance. To act as if is to wake up to what you already are, a creator capable of shaping life through conscious belief. The man smiles, the wind brushing against his face, carrying with it the scent of possibility. He no longer wonders whether the universe listens. He knows. As dusk descends, he stands once more at his window, watching the lights of the city ignite one by one. Each glowing window feels like a heartbeat, millions of souls dreaming, doubting, desiring. Somewhere out there, another person sits in silence, perhaps as he once did, wondering if faith can change reality. And in that quiet moment, he sends out a silent message into the field: yes, it can, but only if you act as though it already has. He breathes deeply, the air thick with life. The skyline glows like molten gold, and within him there is peace, not the peace of completion, but of continuation. For belief has no end, it only deepens. The legacy he leaves is not money, but mastery, the knowledge that wealth, success, and fulfillment all spring from one timeless source, the disciplined imagination of a mind that dares to believe. And as the final light fades, a new dawn begins somewhere else, another story, another seeker, another awakening. The screen fades to black, but the vibration remains. The voice of Hill seems to whisper through the darkness: whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. The story doesn't end here, it merely transforms. If this journey has stirred something within you, if you feel that quiet pull toward the deeper science of success, where thought becomes form and faith becomes fact, then step forward into the next story. The path continues and act as if failure isn't an option until it actually isn't. Because wealth, as you now know, is not what you have. It's what you hold, in mind, in faith, and in vibration.